The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the Manhattan ballroom, their light fracturing across crystal flutes and polished silverware. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my hands smoothing the navy dress I'd saved for months to buy. My heart pounded, not from nerves but from pride. Tonight was Eliza's night, my daughter, the lawyer of the year. 18 years of sacrifice, of late nights and early mornings had led to this moment. I could still feel the weight of her tiny hand in mine, the way she'd clung to me as a child. But when she stepped onto the stage, her voice clear and confident, she said words that stopped my world. "I'm Eliza, daughter of Victoria Langston, the woman who inspired me to become a lawyer." The air felt thick, like I was drowning in it. Victoria Langston? The name burned in my throat. I was Margaret, the one who'd raised her, who'd given her my name, my everything. Why would she erase me like that in front of all these people? I stayed quiet, but not because I had no choice. I was waiting. Welcome to the Betrayal Revenge channel, where stories come alive through voices you've never heard told this way before. Tonight, I invite you to step into a tale of love, betrayal, and the fight for truth, a story that cuts deeper than blood. It all began that evening, 3 months ago, in a ballroom I'll never forget. The scent of expensive perfume and roasted lamb hung heavy in the air. The crowd buzzed with chatter, their laughter sharp and bright, like the clink of wine glasses. I stood near the back, my fingers tracing the edge of my clutch, the one Eliza had picked out for me years ago at a thrift store. "It's classy, Mom," she'd said, her teenage grin wide and unguarded. Now that same girl, my girl, was up there, radiant in a tailored blazer, her dark hair catching the spotlight. She was everything I'd dreamed she'd become, but something felt off, a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. Had I missed something? A sign? A shift? I'd always known Eliza was ambitious, but this felt different. The MC's voice boomed through the microphone, pulling me back. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eliza Margaret Langston, our youngest recipient of the Lawyer of the Year award." The room erupted in applause. I clapped too, my hands trembling, my smile wide enough to hide the ache. Eliza stepped forward, her posture perfect, her eyes scanning the room. For a moment I thought she saw me. Her gaze lingered in my direction, but then she turned away, and that's when she said it. "I'm Eliza, daughter of Victoria Langston, the woman who inspired me to become a lawyer." The words hit like a slap. Victoria Langston. I knew that name. The woman who'd left her, who'd abandoned a 3-year-old girl on my doorstep with nothing but a note and a tattered blanket. My mind raced, replaying the moment. Had I misheard? But the crowd was clapping, their faces lit with admiration, oblivious to the lie. I scanned the room, searching for her, for Victoria. Was she here? Watching? Had she planned this? My legs felt heavy, rooted to the polished hardwood floor. I wanted to scream, to run to the stage and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. I stood there, invisible, while the daughter I'd raised claimed another woman as her mother. The pain wasn't just in my heart. It was in my bones, in the calluses on my hands from years of scrubbing floors to pay for her books, in the sleepless nights I'd spent holding her through fevers and fears. I remembered the day I named her, Eliza Margaret Langston. My last name, not Victoria's. Mine. Because I'd chosen her every single day when no one else had. The applause faded, and Eliza began her speech. Her voice was steady, polished, recounting her journey through law school, her passion for justice. Not once did she mention me. Not once did she look my way. I felt the eyes of strangers on me, pitying, curious, as if they could sense my unraveling. A woman nearby, her diamonds glinting, leaned toward her companion and whispered, "Victoria must be so proud." I wanted to grab her, to tell her the truth, but what would I say? That I was the one who'd braided Eliza's hair, who'd taught her to read, who'd driven her to her first day at Columbia? That I was her mother, not some stranger who'd reappeared to claim her glory? I don't know how long I stood there, my breath shallow, my thoughts a tangle of hurt and questions. Eliza's speech ended, and the crowd surged forward, eager to congratulate her. I stayed back, my fingers tightening around the clutch. Inside it was a gift, a locket I'd had engraved with M+E, our initials, a symbol of the bond I thought we'd never lose. I'd planned to give it to her tonight, to tell her how proud I was. Now it felt like a weight, a reminder of something I'd misjudged. Why would she do this? Was it shame? Ambition? Or had Victoria gotten to her, filled her head with lies? I turned toward the exit, the heels of my shoes clicking against the floor, each step louder than the chatter around me. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, the city's hum a distant roar. I didn't cry, not then. Tears would come later. For now, I needed answers. I needed to know why the daughter I'd given everything to had erased me in a single sentence. How do you love someone who isn't yours by blood? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times, standing in the quiet of my small New Jersey apartment, staring at the empty crib where Eliza once slept. After that night in the ballroom, when she called another woman her mother, I couldn't stop thinking about the beginning, about the moment she came into my life. There was a time when it was just us, when I was her everything. So how did it all slip away? The wind howled outside my window that night in 2007, rattling the loose pane I never got around to fixing. I was 41, a middle school teacher living alone in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of damp wood and coffee. My husband David had been gone for 3 years. Cancer took him fast, leaving me with a half-empty closet and a heart too heavy to move on. I'd gotten used to the silence, the way it pressed against the walls. But that night, the silence broke. A knock at the door, sharp and urgent. I hesitated, my hand on the knob, the cold metal biting my palm. It was past midnight. Who would come now? When I opened the door, there she was, a tiny girl, no more than 3, shivering in a thin coat, her dark eyes wide and unblinking. She clutched a tattered blanket, her cheeks streaked with dirt. A piece of paper was pinned to her sleeve, the ink smudged but legible. I can't keep her. Please, someone kind, take her. My breath caught. I knelt down, my knees creaking, and looked into her face. Sweetheart, what's your name? She didn't answer, just stared, her small body trembling. I pulled her inside, out of the biting cold, and wrapped her in the quilt from my couch. The weight of her in my arms felt right, like a puzzle piece I hadn't known was missing. Was this a mistake? Could I care for a child who wasn't mine? I didn't know, but I couldn't send her back into the dark. I called the police, of course. They came, their radios crackling, their boots heavy on my worn floorboards. They took the note, asked questions I couldn't answer. We'll try to find her family, the officer said, his voice kind but tired. But for now, she can stay with you. You're a teacher, right? You seem capable. Capable. The word felt like a challenge. Days turned into weeks. I searched for her mother, posting flyers, calling shelters, checking records at the local hospital. Nothing. No one claimed her. The social worker assigned to her case, a woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard, told me the system was overloaded. She'd go into foster care, she said, but it's not always kind to kids like her. I looked at the girl sitting on my rug, stacking blocks I'd bought from a second-hand shop. She'd started to smile just a little when I sang to her. Foster care? I couldn't let that happen. So I made a choice. I filed for temporary guardianship, then permanent adoption. The courtroom was sterile, the judge's voice a monotone as he signed the papers. I remember the pen in my hand, heavy as I wrote her name, Eliza Margaret Langston. My last name, because she was mine now, in every way that mattered. The years that followed weren't easy. Teaching didn't pay much, and New Jersey wasn't cheap. I took on extra hours tutoring, grading papers late into the night, the glow of my desk lamp burning my eyes. Eliza's needs grew. Diapers, then clothes, then books. I learned to braid her hair, to soothe her nightmares, to answer her endless why questions. Why is the sky blue, Mommy? She'd ask, her voice bright, her tiny hand in mine. Mommy. The first time she called me that, I cried after she fell asleep, my tears soaking the pillow. But there were shadows. Neighbors whispered, their eyes lingering on us at the grocery store. She doesn't look like you, they'd say. their voices laced with curiosity or judgment. At school, kids teased her, "You're adopted, that's not your real mom." I saw the hurt in her eyes, the way she'd clench her fists. I'd kneel beside her, brushing her hair back, and say, "Real is what we make it, Eliza. I chose you. That's forever." She'd nod, but I wondered if she believed me. I fought for her every day. When she struggled with reading, I spent hours sounding out words, my voice hoarse but patient. When she wanted to join the soccer team but we couldn't afford the fees, I took on weekend shifts at a diner, the smell of grease clinging to my clothes. I missed sleep, missed meals, missed the woman I used to be. But when Eliza laughed, when she ran to me after school with a drawing clutched in her hands, it was worth it. She was worth it. I remember one night, when she was 6, she woke up screaming, her small body shaking from a nightmare. I held her, rocking her in the dark, the hum of the radiator the only sound. "You won't leave me, right, Mommy?" she whispered, her voice so small it broke me. "Never," I promised, my lips against her forehead. "I'm here always." That promise carried me through the years. Through her first school play, where she beamed as a sunflower in a paper crown. Through the parent-teacher conferences, where I sat proud but exhausted, my hands rough from cleaning houses on the side. Through the quiet moments, like when we'd sit on the stoop of our building, eating popsicles, the summer heat sticking to our skin. She'd lean against me, her head on my shoulder, and I'd think, "This is enough, this is everything." But even then, a question lingered, one I buried deep. I'd given her my name, my home, my heart. But would it ever be enough to fill the space left by the woman who'd abandoned her? Could my love outweigh the pull of blood? How do you hold on to someone who's slipping away? I asked myself that question every night after Eliza left for college, her absence a quiet ache in my small apartment. The silence was louder now, broken only by the hum of the fridge or the distant wail of sirens outside. I'd raised her to be strong, to chase her dreams, but I never expected those dreams to pull her so far from me. That night in the ballroom, when she called Victoria Langston her mother, I realized the distance between us had started long before. It began when she found a new circle, one I didn't belong to. The summer before Eliza left for Columbia Law School, I noticed a change. She was 18, her eyes bright with ambition, her laughter quicker than it used to be. We'd always been close, sharing late-night talks over cups of chamomile tea, her feet tucked under my quilt. But that summer, her phone buzzed constantly, her fingers flying over the screen. "Just friends from school," she'd say, her smile tight, and I'd nod, ignoring the knot in my stomach. Was she pulling away, or was I holding on too tight? I couldn't tell. When she moved to New York City, I expected the calls to slow, the visits to dwindle. She was busy, I told myself. Law school was demanding. I'd drive into Manhattan sometimes, bringing her favorite oatmeal cookies, the ones we used to bake together. She'd hug me, her arms warm but brief, and say, "Thanks, Mom, but I've got a study group tonight." I'd smile, hiding the sting, and drive back to New Jersey, the city's lights fading in my rearview mirror. But it wasn't just the distance of miles, it was the way she spoke, her words clipped, her stories vague. "How's school?" I'd ask over the phone, my voice bright. "Fine," she'd reply, her tone flat. "Busy." I'd hear voices in the background, laughter, music, the clink of glasses. "Where are you?" I'd ask, and she'd pause. "Just out," she'd say, and the line would go quiet. One night, restless, I opened my laptop. Eliza had always been private about social media, but I'd created an account to keep up with her world. I scrolled through her posts, my heart lifting at photos of her in a library, her hair pulled back, a textbook open. But then I saw something that stopped me cold. A photo of Eliza at a gala, her arm linked with a woman in a sleek emerald gown. The caption read, "Grateful for mentors who show me what's possible." The woman's name was tagged, Victoria Langston. My mouth went dry. Victoria Langston. The name I'd buried for years, the woman who'd left Eliza on my doorstep with a note and no explanation. I clicked on Victoria's profile. Her photos were a parade of wealth, private jets, charity balls, a penthouse with a view of Central Park. She was elegant, her smile polished, her hair a cascade of auburn. And there, in photo after photo, was Eliza, my Eliza, smiling beside her, their heads tilted close, like they shared a secret. I sat back, my hands trembling. The room felt smaller, the air too thick to breathe. Victoria was married to Charles Langston, a name I recognized from the news, a powerful lawyer, a titan in Manhattan's legal world. Had Eliza found her? Or had Victoria found her? And why hadn't Eliza told me? I remembered a call from a few months earlier. I'd asked about her weekend, and she'd mentioned a networking event. Her voice had been bright, almost too bright. "It was fancy, Mom. You wouldn't like it, too many suits." She'd laughed, but it hadn't reached her eyes when I'd seen her next. I'd brushed it off, thinking she was just tired. Now I wondered what else she'd hidden. I tried to talk to her about it. One evening I called, my fingers tight around the phone. "Eliza, I saw some photos," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You've been spending time with Victoria Langston?" The line went quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with tension. "Yeah," she said finally, her tone guarded. "She's a mentor. She's helping me with law school connections." "A mentor?" I repeated, my heart sinking. "Eliza, do you know who she is?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, it's not a big deal," she said, her voice sharp. "She's just someone I met through school. Don't make it weird." "But," I started, but she cut me off. "I'm busy, okay? Don't get involved in my life like this." Her words were cold, like a door slamming shut. I heard a muffled voice in the background, then her quick, "Gotta go." The call ended, leaving me staring at the phone, the screen dark. I sat there, the apartment silent except for the drip of the kitchen faucet. I thought of the girl who'd once run to me with every secret, her eyes wide with trust. Now she was pulling away, drawn to a woman who'd abandoned her, a woman who lived in a world of glittering lies. I wanted to drive to her dorm to demand answers, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed to understand what Victoria wanted and why Eliza was letting her in. How do you stand tall when the ground beneath you crumbles? That's what I asked myself as I stepped into the Manhattan ballroom, the weight of Eliza's betrayal still raw from weeks of silence. I'd come to support her, to see her shine, even if she hadn't invited me. I clung to the hope that her distance was just a phase, that the daughter I'd raised still needed me. But when she stood on that stage and erased me with a single sentence, I realized the truth. The girl I loved had chosen a stranger's name over mine. How had it come to this? The invitation never came. I'd heard about the ceremony through a colleague whose niece worked at the law firm hosting the event. "Lawyer of the Year," she'd said, her voice bright with gossip. "Your Eliza's getting an award, Margaret. You must be so proud." I'd smiled, my chest tight, and murmured something about how busy Eliza had been. But the truth was, she hadn't told me. No call, no text, no hurried voicemail saying, "Mom, I want you there." Still, I couldn't stay away. This was her moment, and I needed to see it, to feel that connection we'd once had, even if it was just from the shadows. I spent days preparing. I pulled my navy dress from the closet, the one I'd worn to her high school graduation, its hem slightly frayed, but still elegant. I polished my old black pumps, the leather scuffed but serviceable. I even went to the drugstore and bought a new lipstick, a soft coral shade Eliza had once said looked classy on me. Standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I applied it carefully, my hands trembling, the reflection showing a woman with silver hair and lines etched deep from years of worry. I was 62, and I felt every year of it. But tonight, I told myself, I'd be the mother Eliza deserved. Proud, present, unwavering. Was I fooling myself? Could I bridge the gap between us with a dress and a smile? I pushed the thought away, tucking it into the corner of my mind where doubts lived. The drive to Manhattan was long, the highway lights blurring as I gripped the steering wheel. My old sedan rattled, the heater barely keeping the chill at bay. I'd packed a small gift for Eliza, a locket engraved with M+E, our initials, a twin to the one I'd planned to give her at her college graduation. It sat in my clutch, its weight a quiet promise. Maybe tonight I thought we'd talk. Maybe she'd see me and remember who we were. The ballroom was a world apart from my life in New Jersey. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, their light bouncing off marble floors. The air smelled of roses and champagne, the kind of scent that clung to wealth. I slipped in quietly, my ticket a favor from my colleague's niece, and found a spot near the back, half hidden by a velvet curtain. The crowd was a sea of tailored suits and shimmering gowns, their laughter polished, their voices low and confident. I felt out of place, my dress too simple, my hands too rough from years of scrubbing floors. But I straightened my shoulders, my eyes fixed on the stage. This was for Eliza. The MC's voice cut through the chatter, smooth and commanding. Tonight, we honor Eliza Margaret Langston, our youngest lawyer of the year. The room erupted in applause, and I clapped too, my heart swelling. There she was, my daughter, stepping into the spotlight. Her dark hair was swept up, her blazer crisp, her smile radiant. She looked untouchable, like she belonged in this glittering world. For a moment I forgot the distance, the unanswered calls, the photos with Victoria. She was still my Eliza, the girl who'd once drawn me pictures of sunflowers. Then she spoke. "I'm Eliza, daughter of Victoria Langston, the woman who inspired me to become a lawyer." The words sliced through me, sharp and cold. Victoria Langston. The name echoed in my skull, drowning out the applause. I froze, my hands still raised mid-clap, my breath caught in my throat. The crowd didn't notice, their faces lit with admiration, but I felt the world tilt. Victoria, the woman who'd abandoned her, who'd left a 3-year-old on my doorstep with a note and nothing else. And now, Eliza was claiming her as her mother? In front of all these people? I scanned the room, my eyes darting from face to face. Was Victoria here, watching, smiling? I didn't see her, but the thought of her presence made my skin prickle. My fingers tightened around my clutch, the locket inside pressing against my palm. I wanted to run to the stage, to grab Eliza and demand answers. Why? Why would you do this to me? But I didn't move. I stood there, invisible, my heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. Eliza continued her speech, her voice steady, recounting her journey through law school, her passion for justice. She spoke of mentors, of opportunities, of a future she was building. Not once did she mention me. Not once did she glance my way. I felt the eyes of strangers on me, curious, pitying, as if they could sense my unraveling. A man nearby, his cufflinks glinting, leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Victoria Langston must be so proud." I wanted to scream, to tell him the truth. I'm her mother. I'm the one who raised her, who gave her my name, my everything. Instead, I reached into my clutch, my fingers brushing the locket. I'd spent hours choosing it, imagining the moment I'd give it to her, the way her eyes would light up. Now it felt like a relic of a life that no longer existed. I pulled out a handkerchief instead, one I'd embroidered years ago with MC in careful stitches. It was a gift from Eliza when she was 10, her small hands proud as she handed it to me. "For you, Mommy," she'd said, her voice bright. I clutched it now, the fabric soft against my skin, a tether to the past. The applause swelled as Eliza finished, the crowd surging forward to congratulate her. I stayed back, my legs heavy, my throat tight. I watched her shake hands, her smile wide, her laughter easy. She was theirs now. This room's, this world's, not mine. The realization settled in my chest, heavy and cold. 18 years of love, of sacrifice reduced to nothing in a single sentence. How do you carry on when the person you love most has turned you into a stranger? That question haunted me as I drove back to New Jersey, the city's lights fading in my rearview mirror. The ballroom's golden glow, Eliza's voice claiming Victoria as her mother, it all replayed in my mind, each memory a fresh cut. I wanted to call her, to demand answers, but my phone stayed dark, her silence louder than any words. So I turned to the past, to the moments that had defined us, hoping they'd remind me who we were. But even those memories carried a new weight, a question I couldn't shake. Had she forgotten me, or had she chosen to? The hum of my old sedan filled the silence as I crossed the bridge, the Hudson River a dark ribbon below. My hands gripped the wheel, the embroidered handkerchief, M+E, still tucked in my palm, its stitches worn but familiar. The locket I'd brought for Eliza sat heavy in my clutch, unopened, a gift she'd never see. I'd left the ballroom without speaking to her, without letting her see the hurt in my eyes, not because I was weak, but because I needed time to understand, to piece together where we'd gone wrong. Back in my apartment, the air was stale, the faint scent of lavender from a candle I'd burned days ago lingering. I kicked off my pumps, the soles of my feet aching, and sank onto the couch. The room was small, cluttered with pieces of our life, a bookshelf stuffed with Eliza's old textbooks, a chipped mug she'd painted at summer camp, a framed photo of us at her first soccer game, her grin wide and gap-toothed. I stared at that photo, my chest tight. How had we gone from that to this? I closed my eyes, and the memories came, vivid and unbidden. I saw Eliza at 4, her tiny hands clutching a crayon as she learned to write her name. Eliza, she'd sounded out, her tongue poking out in concentration. I'd sat beside her at our kitchen table, the linoleum sticky from spilled juice, guiding her hand. "That's it, sweetheart," I'd said, my voice soft. "You're doing so well." She'd looked up at me, her eyes bright, and said, "Mommy, will you always help me?" I'd promised I would, my heart full. Another memory flickered. Her first day of kindergarten. She'd clung to my hand, her backpack too big for her small shoulders, her braids tight and neat. The schoolyard was chaos, kids running, parents snapping photos, the air sharp with September chill. Eliza's lip trembled as we reached the classroom door. "What if they don't like me?" she'd whispered. I'd knelt down, my knees pressing into the cold pavement, and cupped her face. "They'll love you, Eliza. Just be you." She'd nodded, her trust in me absolute, and let go of my hand. I'd watched her disappear into the classroom, my throat tight, knowing I'd do anything to protect that trust. Then there was the night she got sick, when she was 8. A fever had spiked so high I'd panicked, her small body burning against mine as I held her. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells, the waiting room chairs hard against my back. I'd stayed up all night stroking her hair, whispering stories to keep her calm. "Tell me about the princess again, Mommy," she'd mumbled, her voice weak. So I did, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. When the fever broke, she'd curled into me, her breath soft against my neck, and I'd felt like I could breathe again. These were the moments that had built us, the threads that wove our lives together. I'd been there for every scraped knee, every triumph, every tear. I'd sewn her Halloween costumes, cheered at her spelling bees, saved for her first laptop. I'd given her my name, my time, my everything, so how could she stand on that stage and deny me? I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked to the kitchen. On the counter was a small box, wrapped in silver paper, the gift I'd planned to give Eliza tonight. I'd found it weeks ago, a drawing she'd made at 10, tucked away in a drawer. It was a childish sketch of us, 2 stick figures under a bright sun, the words, "Mom, one day I'll make you proud," scrawled in crayon. I'd had it framed, thinking it would be a perfect surprise, a reminder of our bond. But when I'd arrived at the ballroom, I'd seen it on a chair in the lobby, abandoned among coats and programs. She'd left it behind, just like she'd left me. I picked up the box, my fingers tracing the edges, the paper cool against my skin. I wanted to throw it away, to rid myself of the pain it carried, but I couldn't. Instead, I carried it to my bedroom and opened my jewelry box, a chipped wooden thing David had given me years ago. I placed the frame inside, next to the locket, the handkerchief, the relics of a life I thought we'd shared. The act felt final, like closing a book, but it also sparked something else, a resolve, quiet but fierce. I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs creaking under my weight. The apartment was dark now, the only light coming from a street lamp outside, its glow slanting through the blinds. I thought of Victoria Langston, her polished smile, her world of wealth and power. What had she offered Eliza that I couldn't? Was it money, status, a name that opened doors? Or was it something deeper, a pull I couldn't understand? How do you face a ghost who's taken everything you love? That's what I asked myself as I sat at my desk, the laptop's glow casting shadows across my small apartment. Eliza's betrayal at the ceremony had left me raw, but the memories of our years together kept me grounded. I couldn't let her go, not without understanding why she'd chosen Victoria Langston, the woman who'd abandoned her, over me. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Victoria wasn't just a shadow from the past. She was a predator, circling back to claim what she'd discarded. But what did she want with my daughter? The air in my apartment was heavy, the faint hum of the radiator the only sound as I stared at the screen. My fingers trembled as I typed Victoria Langston's name again, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. The search results spilled out. Articles, photos, society pages. Victoria was everywhere, smiling at charity galas, her arm around Charles Langston, the legal titan whose name carried weight in Manhattan. Her life was a parade of wealth, penthouse parties, private jets, designer gowns that shimmered under camera flashes. But it was the photos with Eliza that stopped me cold. My daughter, radiant and poised, standing beside her, their smiles mirrored, their postures close. They looked like family. I leaned back, my chair creaking, the room suddenly too small. The scent of stale coffee lingered from a mug I'd forgotten on the counter, grounding me in the present. I'd spent weeks piecing together the puzzle, driven by a need to understand. Why had Victoria returned? And why now, after 18 years of silence? I'd started with public records, digging through adoption files at the county office, my hands dusty from old papers. The note pinned to Eliza's coat that night in 2007 had been filed away, its words burned into my memory. I can't keep her. Please, someone kind, take her. No name, no trace, but I'd always suspected it was Victoria, a hunch I'd buried to protect Eliza. Now I had proof. A birth certificate tucked in a forgotten file listed Victoria Langston as Eliza's mother. The father's name was blank, but the date matched. Eliza, born November 2004, 3 years before she'd appeared at my door. I'd cross-referenced it with news archives. In 2004, Victoria had been married to a man named Robert Hayes, a businessman whose company collapsed in scandal. Articles from that time hinted at her unraveling, erratic behavior, whispers of postpartum struggles, a quiet stint in a private clinic. She'd vanished from the public eye after the divorce, leaving no trace until she reemerged, married to Charles Langston a decade later. I sipped the cold coffee, wincing at its bitterness, and clicked on a recent article. Charles Langston was ill, cancer, stage 4. The headlines speculated about his empire, his fortune, his legacy. Victoria was at his side in every photo, her expression a perfect mask of concern. But there was something else, a detail that caught my eye. A mention of Eliza, described as a rising star mentored by the Langstons. Mentored? The word felt like a lie, too tidy, too convenient. I stood, pacing the small living room, my bare feet cold against the worn hardwood. The walls were lined with pieces of our life, Eliza's drawings, a photo of us at the zoo, her tiny hand in mine. I stopped at the window, the street lamp outside casting a pale glow. I remembered a night when Eliza was 7, when she'd asked about her other mommy. We'd been on the couch, her head in my lap, the TV muted. "Why didn't she want me?" she'd whispered, her voice small. I'd stroked her hair, my heart breaking, and said, "She couldn't take care of you, sweetheart. But I'm here, and I'll never leave." She'd nodded, her trust in me a fragile gift. Had Victoria undone that trust, weaving herself back into Eliza's life with promises I couldn't match? I returned to the laptop, my resolve hardening. I searched deeper, pulling up financial records, court documents, anything I could access. Victoria's past was a tangle of contradictions, charity boards and tax disputes, public grace and private chaos. One article mentioned her postpartum breakdown, untreated, spiraling into reckless decisions. Was that why she'd left Eliza? Shame? Instability? Or something colder? I found a clue in a legal filing from 2010, after her marriage to Charles. She'd fought for a share of Robert Hayes' estate, claiming it for family obligations. The case was dismissed, but the timing was telling. She'd known about Eliza even then, and done nothing. Then I stumbled on something that made my blood run cold. A blog post buried in an obscure legal forum speculated about Charles Langston's will. His children from a previous marriage stood to inherit his fortune, but Victoria was fighting for control, leveraging her role as his wife. The post mentioned a new ally in her camp, a young lawyer unnamed but described as close to the family. My stomach twisted. Eliza. Was Victoria using her, grooming her to secure a claim on the Langston wealth? I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. The room was dark now, the street lamp's glow slanting through the blinds, casting stripes across the floor. I thought of Eliza's voice at the ceremony, so sure, so proud, as she claimed Victoria as her mother. Had she known the truth about Victoria's past? Or was she blinded by the glamour, the power, the promise of a life I could never give her? I needed to see Victoria for myself, to understand her hold over my daughter. I remembered an upcoming event, a charity auction in Manhattan, one Victoria was slated to attend. I'd seen it on her social media, a rare public appearance with Charles. I opened my desk drawer, pulling out a notepad where I'd jotted down the details. My handwriting was shaky, the pen digging into the paper. I'd go, I decided, not to confront her, not yet, but to watch, to learn. The next day, I stood outside the auction venue, a sleek building with glass walls that reflected the city's skyline. The air was crisp, smelling of exhaust and roasted chestnuts from a nearby cart. I'd worn my best coat, a wool one that hid the frayed cuffs of my blouse, and held my phone like a shield, its camera ready. Inside, I saw her, Victoria, in a sapphire dress, her laughter bright as she mingled with the elite. Charles was there too, frail but smiling, his hand on her arm. I snapped a photo through the window, my breath fogging the glass, my heart pounding. She looked untouchable, a queen in her court. How do you face the truth when it's standing right in front of you, sharp as a blade? I'd spent weeks chasing answers, piecing together Victoria's shadow over Eliza's life, but nothing prepared me for the moment I'd confront them both. The photo from the auction burned in my mind, Victoria's polished smile, her hand on Charles Langston's arm, a predator cloaked in elegance. I knew she was using Eliza, but I needed to hear it from my daughter's lips. I needed to know why she'd chosen a stranger's name over mine. So I went to her, not with anger, but with a mother's heart, hoping to reclaim what was ours. But what I found in that office was a truth colder than I'd ever imagined. The Manhattan skyline loomed outside my car window, its steel and glass towers reflecting the late afternoon sun. I'd driven into the city with a purpose, my old sedan rattling as I navigated the crowded streets. The address was burned into my memory. Langston and Associates, the law firm where Eliza worked, a sleek building in the heart of the financial district. My hands trembled as I parked, the embroidered handkerchief, M+E, tucked in my coat pocket, a quiet reminder of who we'd been. I'd brought a small box, too, its contents a secret I wasn't ready to reveal, not yet. It sat in my purse, heavy with meaning, a tether to the truth. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and chrome, the air cool and scented with something crisp, like eucalyptus. My shoes clicked against the polished floor, too loud in the hushed space. A receptionist with a flawless smile glanced up. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes flickering over my wool coat, its buttons slightly worn. "I'm here to see Eliza Langston," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. She nodded, tapping at her keyboard. "Do you have an appointment?" I didn't, but I wasn't leaving. "I'm her mother," I said, the word heavy on my tongue. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Was I making a mistake? Would Eliza turn me away again? I pushed the doubt down, my fingers brushing the handkerchief for strength. The elevator ride was silent, the mirrored walls reflecting my face, silver hair pulled back, eyes tired but resolute. I was 62, and I felt the weight of every year, every sacrifice. But I wasn't here to beg. I was here for answers, for the daughter I'd raised, the one who'd once called me Mommy, with absolute trust. The doors opened to a hallway lined with glass offices, the hum of phones and keyboards a low pulse. A young man in a suit led me to a conference room, its long table gleaming under fluorescent lights. "She'll be right in," he said, closing the door. I stood by the window, the city sprawling below, a maze of ambition and secrets. My reflection stared back, faint against the glass, and I remembered a moment from years ago. Eliza at 12, practicing a speech for a school debate, her voice shaky but determined. "Mom, what if I mess up?" she'd asked, her hands twisting. I'd knelt beside her, my hands on hers, and said, "You'll be amazing because you're you." She'd hugged me, her trust a gift. Now I wondered if that girl was still in there, buried under Victoria's lies. The door opened and Eliza stepped in. She looked older, sharper, her blazer tailored, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun. But her eyes, those were the same, wide and searching, though now they held a guarded edge. "Mom," she said, her voice flat, not warm, not cold, just distant. "What are you doing here?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "I needed to see you, Eliza. After the ceremony, after what you said." She cut me off, her hand raised. "I don't have time for this. I'm in the middle of a case." "Eliza," I said softer, stepping closer. "You called Victoria Langston your mother, in front of everyone. Why?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something, guilt maybe, or pain, but then her expression hardened. "Because she's been there for me," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "She's given me opportunities, connections, a future, things you couldn't." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. "I gave you everything I had," I said, my voice steady. "My home, my name, my love. 18 years, Eliza, and you erased me." She looked away, her fingers tapping the table, a nervous habit she'd had since she was a child. "You don't understand," she said, almost a whisper. "This world, it's different. Victoria gets it. She knows how to navigate it." "Navigate what?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "Her lies? Do you know who she is, Eliza? She's the one who left you, who abandoned you on my doorstep with nothing but a note." Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and unreadable. "I know," she said, and the admission stole my breath. She told me everything, about her struggles, her mistakes. "She's changed, Mom. She's trying to make it right." I shook my head, the room spinning. "Make it right? Eliza, she's using you. I've seen the articles, the photos. She's fighting for Charles Langston's fortune, and you're her way in." "That's not true," she snapped, but her voice wavered, a crack in her certainty. Before I could respond, the door opened again, and there she was, Victoria Langston. She stood in the doorway, her auburn hair catching the light, her emerald dress hugging her frame. Her smile was perfect, practiced, but her eyes were cold, assessing. "Margaret," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "What a surprise." I felt the air shift, the room shrinking to just the three of us. Victoria stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click. "Eliza, darling, is everything all right?" she asked, her hand resting on Eliza's shoulder, a gesture that felt possessive, not maternal. Eliza stiffened but didn't pull away. "I came to talk to my daughter," I said, my voice low, my eyes locked on Victoria. "To understand why she's calling you her mother." Victoria's smile didn't falter, but her gaze sharpened. "Oh, Margaret, I'm so sorry you're upset," she said, her tone dripping with false warmth. "Eliza and I have grown close. She's like family to me now." "Like family?" I echoed, my anger rising. "You left her, Victoria. You walked away and never looked back. I'm the one who raised her, who loved her every day." Eliza's eyes darted between us, her hands clenched. "Stop it," she said, her voice breaking. "Both of you." She turned to me, her expression cold, final. "You're not my mother, Margaret. You were just a placeholder until I found my real one." The words cut deeper than anything I'd imagined, each syllable a knife. I stood frozen, the handkerchief in my pocket a useless shield. Victoria's smile widened, a glint of triumph in her eyes. "Eliza, darling," she said softly, "why don't you get back to your work? I'll handle this." Eliza hesitated, her gaze flickering to me, then away. She nodded and left, the door closing behind her with a quiet thud. I was alone with Victoria, the air thick with her perfume, sharp and floral. She stepped closer, her voice low. "You've done so much for her, Margaret, but Eliza's meant for bigger things. Let her go." I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. "She's my daughter," I said, each word deliberate, "and I'll fight for her." Victoria's laugh was soft, almost pitying. "Fight? With what? You have nothing, Margaret. No money, no name, just sentiment." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out the small box I'd brought. It was simple, wooden, unremarkable, but it held everything I needed. I set it on the table, my hands steady, and looked at Victoria. "This is for Eliza," I said, "when she's ready." How do you hold on to hope when the truth feels like a betrayal? That's what I asked myself as I walked away from that cold conference room. Eliza's words, "You're not my mother," echoing in my ears. Victoria's triumphant smile lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake, but the small wooden box I'd left on the table was my anchor. It held more than memories. It held the truth, raw and undeniable. I'd spent years building a life for Eliza, and now I'd given her the key to see it clearly. But would she open it, or would Victoria's lies keep her blind? The elevator doors closed with a soft hum, sealing me in a mirrored cage as I descended from Langston and Associates. My reflection stared back, silver hair escaping its bun, eyes heavy with exhaustion, but my jaw set with a quiet resolve. The handkerchief, embroidered with M+E, was still in my pocket, its stitches a lifeline to the past. My purse felt lighter without the box, but my heart was heavy, each beat a question. Would Eliza understand what I'd left her? Would it change anything? Outside, the Manhattan air was sharp, the late afternoon sun glinting off glass towers. The city pulsed around me, taxis honking, pedestrians rushing, the smell of hot pretzels mingling with exhaust. I stood on the sidewalk, my wool coat too thin against the chill, and let the noise wash over me. I'd come to confront Eliza, to demand answers, but instead I'd faced a truth I hadn't expected. She knew Victoria was her birth mother, and she'd chosen her anyway. The word placeholder cut deeper than I'd admitted, a wound I carried as I walked to my car. I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar creak of the sedan grounding me. My hands rested on the wheel, the leather worn smooth from years of use. I thought of the box, small and unassuming, now sitting on that polished conference table. It wasn't much to look at, but its contents were a reckoning. I'd spent days preparing it, gathering pieces of our life, pieces Victoria could never claim. I closed my eyes, the memory of assembling it vivid, each item a thread in the tapestry of our story. The first was a copy of the guardianship papers, signed by a judge in 2007, yellowed but official. I'd stood in that courtroom alone, my heart pounding, promising to protect a child no one else wanted. The ink of my signature, Margaret Langston, was bold, a vow I'd kept every day since. I'd tucked the document into the box, its weight more than paper, a testament to my choice. Next was a photograph, creased from years in a drawer. It showed Eliza at 4, her dark hair in pigtails, her smile wide as she held a dandelion in our backyard. I'd taken it on a spring day, the grass damp under our feet, the air sweet with blooming lilacs. She'd laughed, blowing the dandelion seeds, and I'd caught the moment, her joy a light in my world. On the back, I'd written the date, April 2008, and a note, the day you made me a mother. Victoria had been gone by then, her absence a void I'd filled with love. The final piece was a USB drive, small but heavy with truth. I'd found it by chance, digging through old files at the adoption agency, a recording from a caseworker's archive. It was Victoria's voice, speaking to a friend in 2005, months after she'd left Eliza. "I never wanted her," she'd said, her tone flat, unrepentant. "She was a mistake, a burden. I'm better off without her." The words had chilled me when I first heard them, but I'd copied the file, knowing Eliza needed to hear the truth. Not my version, but Victoria's own. I'd wrapped the box in plain brown paper, tying it with a ribbon Eliza had once used in her hair, a soft blue she'd loved as a child. It wasn't a gift meant to wound but to awaken. I wanted her to see the life we'd built, the love I'd given, the lies Victoria had spun. But as I sat in my car, the engine idling, doubt crept in. What if she never opened it? What if Victoria took it, destroyed it, kept her in the dark? I drove back to New Jersey, the highway lights blurring as my thoughts churned. The radio was off, the silence filled with memories. I saw Eliza at 10, her hands covered in paint as she gave me a drawing. "Mom, one day I'll make you proud." I saw her at 16, nervous before a debate, practicing in our living room, my applause her anchor. These moments were ours, not Victoria's, but Eliza's words in that office had shaken me. Placeholder. The term was a knife twisting with every mile. When I reached my apartment, the familiar scent of lavender and old wood greeted me. I kicked off my shoes, my feet aching, and sank onto the couch. The room was dark, the only light from a street lamp outside, its glow slanting through the blinds. I pulled the handkerchief from my pocket, tracing the M+E with my thumb. I'd sewn it with her, a rainy afternoon project, her small hands clumsy but determined. "It's for you, Mommy," she'd said, her smile bright. Now it felt like a relic, a piece of a life she'd rejected. I stood, restless, and walked to my bedroom. The jewelry box on my dresser held the locket I'd meant to give her at the ceremony, its M+E engraving a mirror to the handkerchief. I opened it, the hinge creaking, and placed the handkerchief inside, next to the locket and the framed drawing I'd found abandoned at the ballroom. They were fragments of us, pieces I couldn't let go. But the wooden box I'd left with Eliza was different. It wasn't just a memory. It was a challenge, a call to see the truth. I imagined her in that office, alone now, Victoria's shadow gone. Would she pick up the box, her fingers hesitating over the ribbon? Would she open it, see the papers, the photo, hear Victoria's voice confessing her abandonment? I pictured her face, the guarded mask she'd worn crumbling, her hands trembling as she held the drawing she'd made at 10. I saw her tears, not of anger, but of realization, the weight of our years together crashing through Victoria's lies. How do you reclaim a love that's been torn apart? That's what I asked myself as I sat in my quiet apartment, the weight of the wooden box I'd left with Eliza lingering like a held breath. I'd given her the truth, papers, a photo, Victoria's own words, but I didn't know if it would be enough to break the spell of lies. I'd fought for her, not with anger, but with the steady love of a mother who'd never stopped choosing her. Now I waited, hoping she'd see me again, not as a placeholder, but as the one who'd always been there. But when the moment came, it wasn't just about her saying my name. It was about her choosing it. The days after I left the box were heavy, each one stretching long and silent. My apartment felt smaller, the air thick with the scent of old wood and the faint lavender of a candle I hadn't lit in weeks. I went through the motions, grading papers, brewing coffee, watering the wilting fern by the window, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Eliza's cold words in that office. "You're not my mother." I'd left her the truth, but I couldn't make her open it. All I could do was wait, the embroidered handkerchief, M+E, clutched in my hand each night, its stitches a quiet prayer. I stood at my kitchen counter one morning, the light slanting through the blinds, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in weeks, Eliza. My heart stopped, my fingers fumbling as I answered. "Mom?" Her voice was small, trembling, not the sharp edge I'd heard in the office. "Can we talk?" I closed my eyes, the word Mom a spark in the dark. "Of course," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Where are you?" She named a cafe in Manhattan, one we'd visited years ago, and I was out the door before I could second-guess myself. The cafe was tucked on a quiet street, its windows fogged with warmth, the air inside rich with espresso and cinnamon. Eliza sat in a corner, her hands wrapped around a mug, her dark hair loose, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked younger, vulnerable, like the girl who'd once run to me after a bad day. I slid into the seat across from her, my coat still damp from the drizzle outside. "You opened the box," I said, not a question, my gaze steady on hers. She nodded, her fingers tightening on the mug. I didn't know," she whispered. "About Victoria, about what she said." Her voice broke, and I saw the USB drive on the table, its black plastic scratched but intact. I heard her, Mom. She called me a mistake, a burden. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and I wanted to reach for her, but I waited, letting her speak. I thought she wanted me, that she'd changed. But you were there always, and I pushed you away. I took a breath, the weight of her words settling in my chest. Why, Eliza? I asked, soft but firm. Why did you choose her? She looked down, her hands trembling. I wanted to belong, she said, her voice barely audible. Her world, it was big, shiny, easy. She offered me connections, a name that opened doors. I thought I needed that to be someone. She met my eyes, her gaze raw. But I was wrong. I see that now. The cafe hummed around us, the clink of spoons and murmur of voices a distant backdrop. I remembered a moment from her childhood, when she was 9, sitting on our stoop, her knees scraped from a fall. Mom, will I ever be important? She'd asked, her voice small. I'd pulled her close, the summer heat sticking to our skin, and said, You're already important, Eliza. To me, to the world, you don't need anyone else's name. Now I saw that girl in her, searching for the same truth. Before I could speak, she reached into her bag and pulled out the framed drawing, the one she'd made at 10, the stick figures of us under a sun, the words, Mom, one day I'll make you proud, scrawled in crayon. I kept this, she said, her voice thick. I'm so sorry, Mom, for the ceremony, for everything. I reached across the table, my hand covering hers, her skin warm against mine. You're here now, I said, my voice steady. That's what matters. She nodded, wiping her tears, and then she said something I hadn't expected. I'm going to fix this, she said, her jaw set, a fire in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Not just for us, but for everyone to know. A week later, I stood in a crowded press room, the air buzzing with camera clicks and murmured anticipation. Eliza had organized a press conference, her law firm's logo stark against the backdrop. I was in the front row, my hands clasped, the handkerchief tucked in my pocket. She stepped to the podium, her blazer crisp, her posture steady, but her eyes found mine first, a silent promise. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice clear, I'm here to set the record straight. The room quieted, reporters leaning forward. At the Lawyer of the Year ceremony, I made a mistake. I called someone else my mother, someone who didn't raise me, who didn't love me through every moment of my life. She paused, her gaze steady on me. My mother is Margaret Langston. She chose me when I had no one, gave me her name, her heart, her everything. I'm here to honor her, to say I'm sorry, and to say her name. My mother, Margaret Langston. The room erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. My eyes were on Eliza, my daughter, her words a balm to wounds I'd carried too long. I felt tears prick, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall, proud and unashamed. Later I learned the ripple effects. Charles Langston, frail but furious, had revised his will, cutting Victoria out after Eliza shared the truth, her abandonment, her manipulation. Victoria's carefully built facade crumbled, her name absent from the society pages that once adored her. And I received an unexpected call, a producer from a program called Women Who Raised Leaders, inviting me as a guest of honor. Your story inspires us, she said, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. That evening, Eliza came to my apartment, the first time in months. The air smelled of the lasagna I'd made, a recipe we'd perfected together when she was a teenager. We sat on the couch, the familiar creak of the springs a comfort. She reached for my hand, her fingers curling around mine, and whispered, Mom, I'm home. How do you start over when the past has left scars too deep to name? That's what I asked myself as I stood in my apartment, Eliza's hand still warm in mine, her whispered, I'm home, echoing in the quiet. Her press conference had reclaimed our bond, her public apology a light in the darkness of betrayal. Victoria's shadow was fading, her lies exposed, but the wounds she'd left lingered. I'd fought for my daughter, for the truth, and now we faced a new question. Not just how to heal, but how to build something stronger from the ashes. The answer I found wasn't in forgetting. It was in choosing each other, again and again. The morning sun filtered through my apartment's blinds, casting soft stripes across the hardwood floor. The air smelled of coffee and the faint lavender of a candle I'd lit to mark the day. It was a week after Eliza's press conference, and the world felt different, lighter, but not without weight. I stood at the kitchen counter, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the one Eliza had painted with sunflowers when she was 12. The paint was fading, but its warmth was a reminder of who we'd been and who we were becoming. Eliza sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a laptop open on her lap. She was different now, softer, her guarded edges softened by truth. "Mom," she said, looking up, her voice bright, "I got an email from a pro bono group. They want me to take on a case about adoption rights." Her eyes sparkled, the way they had when she was a child, dreaming of changing the world. I think I want to do it, for kids like me." I smiled, my chest swelling. "You'll be amazing," I said, echoing words I'd told her years ago when she'd stood nervous before a school debate. I saw her then, at 16, practicing in our living room, her hands gesturing wildly, my applause her anchor. Now she was stepping into a new role, one shaped by our story, by the truth she'd chosen to embrace. I set my mug down and joined her on the couch, the springs creaking under my weight. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice steady. "Not just for this, but for what you did, standing up, saying my name." She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the laptop. "I should have done it sooner," she said, her voice thick. "I let her, Victoria, cloud everything. I'm sorry, Mom." I reached for her hand, her skin warm against mine. "We're here now," I said, the words a promise. "That's enough." The room was quiet, the hum of the city a distant pulse. I thought of the years we'd lost to distance, to Victoria's lies, but also of the moments we'd reclaimed. I remembered a night when Eliza was 6, sitting on this same couch, her small body curled against me after a nightmare. "You won't leave me, right, Mommy?" she'd asked, her voice trembling. "Never," I'd promised, and I'd kept that vow, even when she'd pushed me away. Now, her hand in mine felt like a bridge, spanning the gap between then and now. That afternoon, we drove to a real estate office in New Jersey, the air crisp with the promise of fall, the scent of damp leaves clinging to the breeze. We'd talked about it for days, a plan that felt both bold and right. Buying back the house where it all began, the one with the stoop where Eliza had sat as a child, sketching us under a crayon sun. It was small, weathered, but it was ours, a place where we'd laughed, cried, and built a life. The agent handed us the keys, her smile warm, and Eliza squeezed my hand, her eyes bright. "We're home," she said, and I felt the truth of it, deep in my bones. We walked through the empty house, our footsteps echoing on the bare floors. The walls were scuffed, the windows drafty, but I saw it as it had been. Eliza's drawings taped to the fridge, her toys scattered across the living room, the smell of oatmeal cookies baking on Sunday mornings. I stopped at the front door, where I'd found her that night in 2007, a shivering 3-year-old with a tattered blanket. I'd chosen her then, and I'd choose her now, every day, no matter what came. Eliza stood beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "I want to hang the drawing here," she said, her voice soft. She meant the one from the box, the stick figures of us, the words, "Mom, one day I'll make you proud," scrawled in crayon. "And a new one," she added, her smile shy, "of us now. I'll sign it, from your daughter, always." I nodded, my throat tight, tears pricking my eyes. "I'd like that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We stepped onto the stoop, the concrete cool under our feet, and sat just as we had years ago, the world quiet around us. The neighborhood had changed, new faces, new houses, but this spot was ours, a cornerstone of our story. Later I learned more about Victoria's fall. She'd left Manhattan, her name erased from the social circles that once adored her. Charles Langston's children had secured his fortune, her schemes undone by Eliza's truth. I felt no triumph, only relief, A chapter closed, a ghost laid to rest. My own path was shifting too. The Women Who Raised Leaders program had invited me to teach, not just as a guest, but as a lecturer on education and resilience. I'd hesitated, my hands rough from years of scrubbing floors, but Eliza's voice had been firm. "You've taught me my whole life, Mom. You're perfect for this." I stood in front of my first class a week later, a small room filled with eager faces, the chalkboard behind me smudged with notes. I wore my best blouse, the one Eliza had picked out, its soft blue a quiet confidence. "I'm Margaret Langston," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm here to talk about what it means to raise someone, to choose them, every day." The words flowed, rooted in our story, and I felt a purpose I hadn't known I'd been searching for. Back at the house, Eliza and I unpacked boxes, the air filled with the scent of fresh paint and possibility. She hung the old drawing in the hallway, its frame catching the light, and beside it, a new one. Us, older, wiser, our smiles mirrored under a painted sun. She'd signed it as promised. "From your daughter. Always." I traced the words with my finger, the paper smooth, and felt a peace settle in my chest. What does it mean to be a mother? I've asked myself that question through every moment of this journey, through the pain of Eliza's betrayal, the fight to reclaim her, and the quiet healing that followed. As I stand in our old house, the walls now fresh with paint, her drawings hung with care, I see the truth clearly. It's not about blood or names or the world's applause. It's about the choice to love day after day through every storm. Eliza is my daughter, not because I gave her life, but because I gave her mine. And that, I've learned, is the strongest bond of all. The evening light spills through the kitchen window, soft and golden, warming the small house we've made ours again. The air smells of fresh coffee and the faint sweetness of the lilac bush outside, blooming late this year. I sit at the table, my hands wrapped around a mug, the one Eliza painted with sunflowers years ago, its colors faded but precious. Across from me, Eliza sketches in a notebook, her pencil scratching softly, her dark hair falling over her shoulder. She's humming, a habit from childhood, and the sound is a melody I thought I'd lost. The house is alive with us, our laughter, our footsteps, our shared silences. The hallway holds her drawings, old and new, each one a chapter of our story. The framed sketch from when she was 10, "Mom, one day I'll make you proud," hangs beside the new one, signed, "From your daughter, always." I glance at them now, my heart full, the weight of the past lighter but never gone. Victoria's shadow has faded, her name a whisper in a world that no longer matters. But the scars she left, the questions she raised, linger in the quiet moments. I stand, my chair scraping the floor, and walk to the front door. The stoop is there, worn but sturdy, where I found Eliza all those years ago, a shivering child with a tattered blanket. I step outside, the evening air cool against my skin, and sit, the concrete familiar under my hands. The neighborhood hums, kids biking, a dog barking, the distant rumble of a car. I close my eyes and the memories come, not as pain, but as strength. I see Eliza at 3, her first words halting but clear. "Mommy, a gift I earned with every lullaby." I see her at 7, her hands sticky with popsicle juice, laughing as we sat on the same stoop, the summer heat wrapping us close. I see her at 16, nervous before a debate, her eyes searching mine for courage. I see the nights I stayed up, sewing her costumes, grading papers, scrubbing floors to pay for her dreams. I see the ballroom, her voice cutting me out, and the press conference, her voice bringing me back. Every moment, every choice built this life. I didn't give her blood, I didn't give her wealth or a name that opened doors. But I gave her me, my time, my heart, my unwavering choice to stay. When she was a child, too small to understand, I chose her. When she pushed me away, chasing a glittering lie, I chose her. When she stood on that stage and erased me, I chose her. And when she came back, tears in her eyes, I chose her again. That's what makes a mother. Not the act of birth, but the act of showing up every day, no matter the cost. Eliza joins me on the stoop, her notebook tucked under her arm, her smile soft. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" she asks, her voice warm, the guarded edge gone. I look at her, my daughter, her eyes the same as that 3-year-old's, wide and searching, but now carrying the weight of truth. "You," I say, my voice steady, "and how I'd choose you all over again." She leans against me, her head on my shoulder, the way she did as a child. The air is quiet, the stars beginning to prick the sky, and I feel a peace I've fought for. I think of the embroidered handkerchief, the locket, the wooden box, all the relics of our journey, tucked away but never forgotten. They're not just memories, they're proof of a love that endured. I don't know what the future holds. There will be new challenges, new questions, new moments of doubt, but I know this: we'll face them together as we always have. Blood may tie you to someone, may give you a start, but it's the heart that builds a family. It's the choice to stay, to fight, to love through every fall and rise. And if I had to do it all again, the sleepless nights, the aching hands, the heartbreak, I'd choose Eliza every time.